The metal locker door slammed shut with a thunderous bang that echoed through the empty hallway. And 17-year-old Amara Johnson heard the unmistakable click of a padlock sealing her inside the cramped, suffocating darkness. As laughter erupted from the group of boys outside, led by Tyler Bennett, the Golden Boy quarterback who ruled Lincoln High with his father's money and his fists, she could feel her carefully maintained composure finally shatter after months of enduring their escalating torment. What Tyler and his crew didn't know was that the quiet black girl they'd been terrorizing wasn't just another helpless victim. She was a nationally ranked junior boxer who had promised her grandmother she'd never use her skills outside the ring. But trapped in that pitch-black metal coffin with her claustrophobia kicking in and oxygen running thin, Amara made a decision that would change everything. Sometimes promises had to be broken when survival was on the line. Amara Johnson had transferred to Lincoln High School in suburban Connecticut at the beginning of her junior year. Moving from inner-city Chicago after her mother landed a prestigious position at a nearby hospital, the culture shock was immediate and overwhelming. Where her old school had been diverse and vibrant, Lincoln High was predominantly white, wealthy, and wrapped in traditions that felt more like barriers than welcome mats. At 5 feet 4 inches, with an athletic build hidden under baggy hoodies and loose jeans, Amara had made a conscious decision to blend into the background, to become invisible in this new environment where she stuck out like a sore thumb. Her morning routine was precise and calculated. She arrived at school exactly 15 minutes before first bell. Not early enough to linger in the hallways where trouble might find her, but not so late that she'd draw attention rushing to class. She kept her natural hair in tight braids close to her scalp, wore no jewelry, except for the small gold cross her grandmother had given her, and carried her books in a plain black backpack that revealed nothing about who she really was. To the students and teachers at Lincoln High, she was just another scholarship kid, probably there to fill some diversity quota. At least that's what she overheard people whispering when they thought she couldn't hear. What none of them knew was that Amara had been training at her uncle's boxing gym since she was 7 years old. Uncle Marcus had been a professional boxer in his youth, and when he saw the natural athleticism and quick reflexes in his niece, he began teaching her the sweet science of boxing. By the time she was 15, she had won 3 junior national championships and was being scouted by Olympic development programs. Her coach back in Chicago had called her a prodigy, someone with the potential to go all the way to the Olympics if she stayed focused and disciplined. But her grandmother, who had raised Amara after her father died when she was 3, had strict rules about fighting. These hands are for sport, not for settling scores. Grandma Rose would say, her weathered hands holding Amara's face gently but firmly. You got a gift, baby girl. But gifts can become curses if you use them wrong. Promise me, you'll never throw a punch in anger. Never use what you learn to hurt someone unless your life depends on it. Amara had made that promise at 13, after she'd gotten suspended from middle school for breaking a boy's nose when he'd grabbed her inappropriately. She'd kept that promise for 4 years, even when every instinct screamed at her to defend herself. Tyler Bennett noticed her on her 3rd day at Lincoln High. He was everything she'd learned to avoid, 6 feet 2 inches of entitled white privilege wrapped in a Letterman jacket, with perfectly styled blonde hair and the kind of smile that charmed teachers and terrorized students in equal measure. His father owned several tech companies and had donated enough money to the school to have the new science wing named after their family. Tyler moved through the hallways like he owned them, because in many ways, Ed did. His inner circle consisted of 4 other boys who'd grown up together in this affluent suburb, bound by shared privilege and a complete lack of consequences for their actions. There was Connor Mitchell, the vice principal's son who used his father's position like a get-out-of-jail-free card; Marcus Webb, whose mother was a state senator, and who carried himself with the kind of arrogance that came from knowing his family had political connections; David Park, the mayor's nephew who, despite being Korean, had fully embraced the worst aspects of his friend's behavior to fit in; and finally, there was Jake Thompson, Not rich like the others, but desperate enough for their approval that he'd do anything they asked, making him perhaps the most dangerous of all. The harassment started small, the way it always does with bullies, testing boundaries. Tyler would deliberately bump into her in the hallways, sending her books flying while he continued walking without even a backward glance. His friends would make monkey noises when she passed, just quiet enough that teachers couldn't hear but loud enough to make her skin crawl with humiliation and rage. They'd leave bananas on her desk with notes that said, "For the ape," thinking they were clever with their racism disguised as pranks. Amara endured it all in silence, counting backward from 10 in her head the way her trainer had taught her to control her breathing before a match. She'd pick up her scattered books without comment, throw away the bananas without giving them the satisfaction of a reaction, and continue through her days as if their cruelty was nothing more than background noise. She told herself it was temporary, that if she didn't engage, they'd get bored and move on to easier targets. But her lack of response seemed to infuriate Tyler more than any confrontation could have. He was used to getting reaction stares, anger, fear, something he could point to as evidence of his power. Amara's stoic endurance was like a challenge to his authority, a silent statement that he didn't matter enough to warrant her emotional investment. And Tyler Bennett was not someone who tolerated being ignored. The escalation was gradual but relentless. The accidental bumps became deliberate shoves that sent her stumbling into walls. The racist notes evolved into more explicit threats. Someone he suspected Connor hacked into her social media accounts and posted humiliating fake confessions about being desperate for white boys' attention. Her locker was vandalized weekly with racial slurs that the janitor would quietly clean off without ever reporting to the administration. On a particularly bad Thursday in November, Amara arrived at school to find her locker standing open, the lock cut clean through with bolt cutters. Inside, someone had stuffed it full of cotton balls with a sign that read, "Pick this, slave." The historical weight of that imagery, the deliberate cruelty of it, made her hands shake as she began pulling the cotton out handful by handful. She could hear snickering from down the hall where Tyler and his crew were watching, phones out to record her humiliation. Look at her actually picking it. Connor laughed loud enough for everyone in the hallway to hear. Maybe we should start paying her. What's minimum wage for field work these days? Probably more than her mama makes cleaning houses. Marcus Webb added. Even though he had no idea what Amara's mother did for a living, the assumption that any black woman must be a maid or cleaner was just another layer of their casual racism. Jake Thompson, ever eager to prove himself to the group, stepped forward with mock concern. "You need help with that? I know you people aren't used to doing work without someone cracking a whip." But that's enough. A voice interrupted. Miss Chen, one of the few teachers of color at Lincoln High, stood with her arms crossed, looking at the boys with undisguised disgust. "All of you, principal's office. Now." But Amara knew nothing would come of it. Connor's father would make some calls. The boys would get a slap on the wrist. Maybe a day of in-school suspension that they'd treat like a vacation. The system was designed to protect them, not her. She'd learned that lesson the first time she tried reporting the harassment and was told by the guidance counselor that boys will be boys and maybe she should try to fit in better. That night, Amara stood in front of her bathroom mirror, staring at the reflection of a girl she barely recognized anymore. Back in Chicago, she'd been confident, outgoing, quick to laugh and quicker to stand up for herself and others. The boxing ring had been her second home, a place where her strength was celebrated, not something to hide. Here, she'd become a ghost of herself, shrinking smaller every day, swallowing her rage until it felt like it might choke her. She FaceTimed with her grandmother that evening, careful to keep the exhaustion and pain out of her voice. Grandma Rose might be 800 miles away, but she could read Amara like a book, even through a phone screen. "How's school, baby?" her grandmother asked, her eyes sharp behind her reading glasses. "It's fine, Grandma. Just different from home." "You know? Different how?" Amara wanted to tell her everything, wanted to cry about the daily humiliations, the casual cruelty, the way these boys looked at her like she was less than human. But she knew what would happen if she did. Grandma Rose would be on the next flight to Connecticut, and her mother would probably pull her out of school entirely. They'd sacrificed so much for this opportunity, her mother taking the hospital job that paid twice what she'd made in Chicago, selling their house, leaving behind family and friends. Amara couldn't be the reason it all fell apart. Just, quieter, she said finally. Smaller classes. I miss the noise sometimes. Her grandmother studied her through the screen for a long moment. You still training? Yeah. There's a gym about 20 minutes away. Mom drives me 3 times a week. Good? You keep those hands sharp. But more importantly, you keep that mind sharp. Don't let nobody make you forget who you are. Amara Johnson. You come from warriors. Baby girl, your great-grandfather fought in World War II when they wouldn't even let him eat at the same table as white soldiers. Your grandfather marched with Dr. King. Your daddy died protecting people as a police officer. You got strength in your blood that these people can't even imagine. After the call ended, Amara shadowboxed in her room, throwing combinations at an invisible opponent. Jab, cross, hook, uppercut. The movements were muscle memory, as natural as breathing. She imagined Tyler's smirking face in front of her, pictured the satisfaction of her glove connecting with his perfect nose. But then she heard her grandmother's voice in her head. Promise me. And she dropped her hands, frustrated tears burning her eyes. The next few weeks brought a brief respite. Tyler had apparently been grounded after the cotton incident. His father finally embarrassed enough by his son's behavior to impose some consequences without their leader. The other boys seemed less focused in their harassment. They still made comments, still accidentally bumped into her, but it lacked the coordinated cruelty that Tyler brought to their activities. Amara used the breathing room to throw herself into her training. The boxing gym she'd found was run by an old Puerto Rican man named Miguel, who'd immediately recognized her skill level. You fight like someone with anger to burn, he'd told her after their first sparring session. That's good for winning, but dangerous for living. You need balance. Maya. She found that balance in the ring, channeling months of suppressed rage into perfect form and devastating combinations. Her sparring partners, mostly grown men, who'd initially gone easy on the teenage girl, quickly learned that Amara was not to be underestimated. Word spread through the local boxing community about the new girl with lightning hands and footwork like a dancer. But all too soon, Tyler's punishment ended, and he returned to school with a vengeance. Maybe it was the humiliation of being disciplined, or maybe he'd spent his grounding time planning his revenge. But either way, he came back worse than before. It started on a Monday morning in early December. Amara arrived at school to find a crowd gathered around her locker. As she pushed through to see what was happening, her stomach dropped. Someone had superglued a life-sized photo of a gorilla to her locker door with Amara's school ID written across the top. The crowd was a mix of kids laughing, taking pictures, and a few looking uncomfortable but saying nothing. Oh good. She's here. Tyler's voice rang out from behind her. We wanted to make sure your locker was properly decorated for the holidays. Though I guess your people celebrate Kwanzaa or whatever made-up holiday, right? Amara didn't turn around. She walked to her locker, entered her combination, and tried to open it. The door stuck, the edges sealed with more superglue. She could hear Tyler and his friends laughing, hear the whispers and giggles from other students. Feel the weight of all those eyes on her? What's wrong? Connor asked with fake concern. Having trouble? Maybe you need to evolve opposable thumbs first, or maybe she's waiting for a white person to open it for her. David Park added, always eager to prove he was one of them, despite his own minority status. You know, like the old days. Something inside Amara shifted in that moment. It wasn't a break. Exactly. More like tectonic plates, sliding into a new configuration. She turned around slowly, her dark eyes finding Tyler's blue ones across the crowded hallway. For just a second, she let him see what was beneath her calm exterior: the trained fighter, the predator, the warrior her grandmother had talked about. Tyler actually took a small step back before catching himself. "You got something to say?" he challenged, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. Amara smiled, and several students nearby shivered at the sight. It wasn't a happy smile or even an angry one. It was the smile of someone who had made a decision. "No?" she said quietly, her voice carrying despite the noise around them. "Not yet." She turned and walked away, leaving her locker sealed shut, leaving the crowd confused and Tyler unsettled. She had no books for her morning classes, but that didn't matter. Something was coming. She could feel it like electricity in the air before a storm. Tyler had been escalating for months, pushing boundaries to see when she'd break. He wanted a reaction, needed it to validate his power. He was going to get one, just not the kind he expected. The next 2 days passed in tense anticipation. Tyler seemed thrown off by Amara's response to the locker incident, alternating between trying to provoke new reactions and watching her warily. His friends followed his lead, uncertain how to act when their usual victim wasn't playing her assigned role anymore. The other students sensed the shift too, giving both Amara and Tyler's group wider berths in the hallway, as if they could feel the violence brewing beneath the surface. Amara continued attending classes without her books, taking notes on loose paper she borrowed from sympathetic classmates. Teachers noticed, but said nothing, whether out of indifference or fear of getting involved in whatever was happening. She couldn't tell. She spent her lunch periods in the library, reading books about war strategy and fighter psychology, preparing for a battle she could feel approaching like a freight train. On Thursday morning, December 10th, everything came to a head. Amara arrived at school to find the hallway near her locker deserted, except for Tyler and his 4 friends. They were standing in a semicircle, clearly waiting for her. The predatory grins on their faces made her pulse quicken, but not with fear. Her body recognized the pre-fight adrenaline and began preparing accordingly. Breathing steadied, muscles loosened, vision sharpened. "Morning, Amara," Tyler said with false friendliness. "We felt bad about your locker situation, so we fixed it for you." She looked past them to see her locker standing open, the gorilla picture gone. For a moment, she felt a flicker of confusion. Were they actually apologizing? Then she noticed how Connor kept glancing at his phone, how Marcus was positioning himself to block the security camera's view, how Jake was practically bouncing on his feet with nervous energy. "Thanks," she said carefully, walking toward her locker while keeping all 5 boys in her peripheral vision. "No problem," Tyler said, his grin widening. "We even put your books back for you. Why don't you grab them so you're not late for class?" Every instinct screamed danger, but Amara kept walking. Whatever they had planned, she was tired of running from it, tired of being afraid, tired of letting them control her life with their hatred and cruelty. She reached her locker and looked inside. Her books were there, stacked neatly, too neatly. She could see something else too. Shoved behind them, more cotton, what looked like a noose made of rope. And was that a Confederate flag? She started to turn day to confront them about this new attempt at psychological torture, when she felt hands on her back, multiple hands, shoving hard. She stumbled forward, her upper body going into the locker, and before she could recover her balance, she heard the door slam shut behind her with tremendous force. The darkness was immediate and absolute. The locker was just big enough for her to stand in if she kept her arms at her sides, but not big enough to turn around. She heard the click of a padlock being fastened on the outside, followed by explosive laughter from all 5 boys. "How's it feel to be in a cage where you belong?" Tyler's voice was muffled but clear through the metal. "Don't worry, we'll let you out. Eventually, maybe by lunch. Or maybe we'll just leave you there overnight. Let the janitor find you in the morning." "But she's used to cages," Jake added, trying too hard as always. "Her dad's probably in one right now." "Nah," Connor said. "Her dad's probably been gone since she was born." You know how those people are? The laughter continued, cruel and victorious. Amara heard other voices, two students arriving for early classes, some asking what was going on, others just laughing along when Tyler explained they were teaching the uppity new girl a lesson. In the darkness of the locker, Amara felt the walls closing in. Claustrophobia, which she'd never experienced before, began clawing at her chest. The air already felt thinner, harder to breathe. How long could someone survive in a locked locker? How long before the oxygen ran out? How long before she started screaming and gave them exactly what they wanted? Her fear, her panic, her complete breakdown? But then something else took over. The same calm that descended on her in the ring when the bell rang and the fight began. Her breathing slowed and deepened, maximizing oxygen efficiency. Her muscles relaxed, conserving energy, and her mind, trained through years of strategic fighting, began analyzing the situation with cold precision. The locker was metal, but it was also old. She could feel rust under her fingertips, spots where the structure had weakened over decades of use. The door had been slammed with tremendous force. They damaged the hinges. She tested them quietly, feeling for give in the metal. Outside, Tyler was still grandstanding. Maybe we should put a sign on the locker, specimen display or something. What do you think, guys? Or return to Africa, Marcus suggested, earning another round of laughter. Amara's hands found the weakest point in the locker door, near the bottom hinge where rust had eaten through most of the metal. She positioned herself carefully in the cramped space, drawing on every bit of flexibility training she'd done. This wasn't about anger anymore. This wasn't about revenge or proving a point. This was about survival. And in survival situations, her grandmother's rules no longer applied. She took 3 deep breaths, oxygenating her blood the way she did before a fight. On the exhale of the 3rd breath, she exploded into action. Her right foot, powered by legs that could deliver over 800 pounds of force, slammed into the weak point of the door. The metal shrieked in protest. She kicked again and again, each blow precisely targeted and devastatingly powerful. "What the hell?" she heard Connor say. "Is she—" The bottom hinge gave way with a sound like a gunshot. The door twisted, light flooding through the gap. One more kick sent the entire door flying open, hanging at a crazy angle from just the top hinge, and Amara Johnson stepped out of that locker like an avenging angel emerging from hell itself. The hallway had filled with students in the few minutes she'd been trapped, all of them drawn by the commotion. They scattered backward as she emerged, some screaming, others pulling out phones to record. Tyler and his friends stood frozen, their mouths hanging open in shock at the sight of the girl they'd tried to cage standing free, her eyes blazing with a fury that made their earlier cruelty look like child's play. "You wanted to see the real me," Amara said, her voice carrying over the stunned silence. "You wanted to see what happens when you push someone too far? Congratulations. You're about to get your wish." Tyler tried to recover his bravado, stepping forward with his chest puffed out. "Oh, what are you gonna do? Hit me? Go ahead. Give me a reason to have you arrested. My dad's lawyers will." He never finished the sentence. Amara's left jab caught him square in the mouth, snapping his head back and splitting his lip wide open. Blood sprayed across his Letterman jacket as he staggered backward, his hands flying to his face in shock. "You hit me," he screamed through his fingers, blood running down his chin. "You actually hit me. Someone call the police. I want her arrested." But Amara was already moving. Connor tried to grab her from behind, probably thinking his size advantage would make it easy. She drove her elbow back into his solar plexus with surgical precision, folding him in half like a lawn chair. As he gasped for air, she spun and brought her knee up into his descending face. Feeling his nose crunch under the impact, Marcus Webb came at her from the left, swinging wildly. She slipped under his haymaker with ease, her body moving on pure instinct. Now, a right hook to his ribs made him drop his guard, and she followed with a left uppercut that lifted him off his feet. He crashed to the floor, groaning and clutching his midsection. "Stop her!" Tyler screamed, blood still pouring from his mouth. "Somebody stop her!" But the crowd of students just watched in stunned silence as Amara systematically dismantled the boys who had terrorized not just her, but dozens of other students over the years. This wasn't a fight, it was a reckoning. David Park tried to run, but Amara caught him by the back of his collar and yanked him backward. "Where are you going?" "David," she asked, her voice deadly calm. "I thought you wanted to teach me a lesson about knowing my place." "Well, class is in session." She spun him around and hit him with a combination that would have made her trainer proud. Jab, cross, left hook to the body. Finished with an overhand right that sent him spinning to the floor. He landed next to Marcus, both of them groaning in pain. That left Jake Thompson, who was pressed against the lockers, hands up in surrender, actually crying. "Please," he begged. "Please don't hit me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. They made me do it. I didn't want to, but they said if I didn't help." "They made you?" Amara asked, stalking toward him. "They made you call me racial slurs? They made you joke about my father being in prison? They made you help lock me in that locker?" "I'm sorry," Jake sobbed. "I'll do anything. I'll tell everyone the truth about what we've been doing. I'll testify." You'll shut up." Chula snarled, pushing himself off the floor, his face a mask of blood and rage. "You'll shut up, or I'll make your life even worse than hers." He charged at Amara, apparently thinking his size and football training would give him an advantage. She waited until the last second, then pivoted on her back foot and threw a perfect check hook that caught him on the temple. His momentum carried him past her as his legs gave out, and he crashed face first into the lockers with a sound like a gong being struck. Tyler crumpled to the floor and didn't get back up, though Amara could see he was still breathing. She turned back to Jake, who had slid down the lockers and was sitting on the floor, still crying. "You want my forgiveness?" she asked him. "Then you're going to tell the truth. All of it. Every single thing you and your friends have done, not just to me, but to everyone. And if you lie, if you leave anything out, if you try to protect them or yourself." She let the threat hang in the air. Jake nodded frantically. "I will. I promise. I'll tell them everything." The sound of adult voices and running feet announced the arrival of teachers and security. Amara stepped back from the carnage. She'd created 4 boys on the floor in various states of consciousness, blood on the tiles, a locker door hanging off its hinges, and a crowd of students who just witnessed months of pent-up rage unleashed in less than 2 minutes. "What happened here?" Principal Morrison pushed through the crowd, his face going pale as he took in the scene. "Someone call an ambulance? And the police?" "I'll tell you what happened," Amara said, her voice steady, despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. "These 5 boys attacked me. They shoved me into my locker and locked me inside. I defended myself to escape. And I'm pressing charges for false imprisonment, assault, and hate crimes." "That's a lie," Connor wheezed from the floor, still struggling to breathe properly. "She attacked us for no reason. We were just—" "I have it all on video," a voice called out from the crowd. A freshman girl Amara didn't know held up her phone. "I recorded the whole thing. Them pushing her into the locker, locking it, saying all that racist stuff, and her breaking out." "Me too," another student added. "I've been recording Tyler and his friends bullying people all year. I have dozens of videos." More voices joined in, students finally finding the courage to speak up. Now that the bullies were bleeding on the floor instead of strutting through the hallways, Principal Morrison looked overwhelmed as he tried to process the situation. "Everyone calm down," he said, though his voice lacked authority. "Miss Johnson, you need to come with me. The rest of you, she's not going anywhere without her mother and a lawyer present." A firm voice interrupted. Miss Chen pushed through the crowd, positioning herself protectively near Amara. "And I'll be staying with her until they arrive. As for these boys, I suggest you check their disciplinary records. I've filed numerous reports about their behavior that seem to have mysteriously disappeared." The next hour was chaos. Paramedics arrived to treat the boys. Though none of their injuries were serious, Amara had been precise in her violence, inflicting maximum pain with minimal actual damage. Police officers took statements from what seemed like half the student body, with more and more kids coming forward with stories of harassment and bullying by Tyler and his crew. Amara's mother arrived like a force of nature, dressed in her doctor's scrubs and radiating the kind of controlled fury that made even the police officers step back. "Where is my daughter?" Dr. Johnson demanded, "and someone better explain to me why she was locked in a locker by 5 boys and is somehow being treated like the aggressor here." "Mom?" Amara said quietly when they were finally reunited in the principal's conference room. "I'm okay. I'm sorry. I know I promised Grandma." "Baby, you have nothing to apologize for," her mother said fiercely, pulling her into a hug. "Nothing. You defended yourself against 5 attackers. I'm proud of you for showing restraint." "Restraint?" Principal Morrison looked incredulous. "She hospitalized 5 students." "No." Dr. Johnson corrected coldly. "She gave 5 racist bullies who falsely imprisoned her some bruises and bloody noses. I've seen what my daughter can do when she's actually trying to hurt someone. Trust me, if she hadn't shown restraint, those boys would be in the ICU, not walking out with ice packs." The family lawyer Amara's mother called was a shark in a suit who took one look at the video evidence and practically salivated. "False imprisonment, assault, conspiracy to commit hate crimes, and that's just the criminal charges," she said. "The civil suit against the boys' families and the school district for failing to protect my client will be substantial. I hope your insurance is up to date." Principal Morrison. In the end, it was Tyler's own father who sealed their fate. When he arrived at the school, red-faced and blustering about his son being attacked, he made the mistake of saying within earshot of several recording phones, "I don't care what Tyler did, you don't let some girl, especially one like that, put her hands on my son." The "especially one like that" comment went viral within hours, adding fuel to a social media firestorm that was already spreading beyond Lincoln High. Number Amara Johnson began trending, with thousands of people sharing their own stories of bullying and racist harassment. Boxing communities rallied around one of their own, with several prominent fighters offering to help with Amara's legal fees. Tyler Bennett, Connor Mitchell, Marcus Webb, David Park, and Jake Thompson were all expelled from Lincoln High after a brief investigation revealed years of documented harassment that had been systematically covered up. Criminal charges were filed, and while their families' money kept them out of jail, they all received probation and mandatory community service. More importantly, the investigation revealed a pattern of protection and cover-ups that went all the way to the top of the school administration. Principal Morrison was forced to resign, along with Connor's father and several other administrators who had been complicit in ignoring or hiding complaints about the boys' behavior. The weeks following the incident transformed Lincoln High in ways no one could have predicted. Amara returned to school after a 3-day suspension, a technicality that her lawyer assured was merely procedural and would be expunged from her record. As she walked through the front doors that Monday morning, she expected stares, whispers, maybe even hostility from friends of Tyler and his crew. What she found instead was something entirely different. Students actually applauded as she walked down the hallway. Not everyone, some still looked at her with fear or disapproval, but enough that the sound echoed off the walls. Kids she'd never spoken to before approached her with stories of their own experiences, thanking her for finally standing up to the bullies who had made their lives miserable for years. "Tyler pantsed me in front of everyone freshman year," a skinny sophomore told her. "I never reported it because I knew nothing would happen. Thank you for doing what I couldn't. Connor used to steal my lunch money every day," another student shared. "When I told the counselor, she said I should try bringing less money to school." The stories kept coming, painting a picture of systematic abuse that had been allowed to flourish under the previous administration. Amara found herself in the unexpected position of being a symbol of resistance, a role she hadn't sought, but couldn't abandon now that others were looking to her for inspiration. Miss Chen, who had been promoted to interim vice principal, called Amara into her office at the end of that first week back. "How are you handling all this attention?" she asked. Genuine concern in her voice. Amara shrugged, still uncomfortable with her newfound notoriety. "It's weird. I just wanted to be left alone, and now everyone wants to talk to me." "You did more than defend yourself," Miss Chen said gently. "You broke a cycle of abuse that had been going on for years. That takes incredible courage." "It wasn't courage," Amara said quietly. "It was just enough. I'd had enough." Miss Chen nodded understandingly. "Sometimes that's what courage is, reaching the point where enough is enough and doing something about it. But I wanted to talk to you about something else. We're implementing new anti-bullying policies, and I'd like you to be part of the student committee, helping to draft them. Your perspective would be invaluable." Amara considered this. Part of her wanted to fade back into the background, to return to the invisibility she'd cultivated before. But she thought about all the students who had approached her with their stories, all the kids who were still suffering in silence at schools everywhere. "Okay," she said finally, "I'll do it." Meanwhile, the legal consequences for Tyler and his friends were just beginning. The viral video of Tyler's father's racist comment had destroyed his business reputation overnight. Several major contracts were canceled, and 3 of his companies faced boycotts. The Bennetts ended up moving out of state, Tyler finishing his senior year at a military school in Virginia where his father hoped discipline would straighten him out. Connor Mitchell's father was forced to resign from his position as vice principal after the investigation revealed he'd been systematically destroying complaints about his son and his friends. The state education board revoked his administrative license, effectively ending his career in education. The Mitchells sold their house at a loss and moved to a smaller town where no one knew their shame. Marcus Webb's mother, the state senator, faced a primary challenge from a young black woman who made school safety and anti-bullying legislation the centerpiece of her campaign. The scandal of her son's behavior, combined with revelations that she'd used her influence to suppress complaints, cost her the election by a landslide. David Park perhaps faced the harshest social consequences. The Korean-American community that his family was part of completely ostracized them. His parents' restaurant saw business drop by 70% as word spread about their son's participation in racist attacks. His mother was seen crying at a community meeting, apologizing for her son's actions and her failure to raise him properly. Jake Thompson, the follower who'd broken down and confessed everything, ended up transferring to a public school in a different district. True to his word, he testified in all the legal proceedings, detailing years of harassment and abuse. His former friends branded him a snitch and a traitor, but he seemed almost relieved to be free of their influence. As for Amara, she found her life changed in ways both challenging and rewarding. The boxing gym where she trained became flooded with new members' kids who'd been bullied and wanted to learn to defend themselves. Miguel, the gym owner, asked her to help teach a self-defense class specifically for teens. "You don't teach them to fight," he told her. "You teach them to be strong, to have confidence. Fighting is last resort. But knowing you can fight changes how you walk through the world." Amara understood exactly what he meant. She'd kept her promise to her grandmother for as long as she could, but breaking it had freed something inside her. Not a love of violence, but a refusal to be victimized. She threw herself into teaching, showing scared kids how to stand tall, how to use their voices before their fists, and yes, how to defend themselves when all else failed. One evening in February, as she was cleaning up after a particularly energetic class, her phone rang. It was her grandmother calling for their weekly check-in. "Hey, Grandma," Amara answered, bracing herself for disappointment or lectures. "Don't you hey Grandma me, young lady." Rose's voice came through, but there was warmth in it. "I saw the videos. Your mama sent me everything." "I'm sorry, Grandma. I know I promised." "Hush now, and let me speak," her grandmother interrupted. "When I made you promise not to fight in anger, I thought I was protecting you. I didn't want you ending up in trouble. Didn't want you labeled as violent or aggressive. But I forgot something important. What's that? I forgot that sometimes the world doesn't give you a choice. Sometimes being peaceful just makes you an easier target. What those boys did to you, locking you up like that." Her voice cracked with emotion. "Baby girl, you did what you had to do. Your great-grandfather would be proud. Your daddy would be proud, and I'm proud too." Amara felt tears stinging her eye. "Really? Really? But I got one question. You didn't hurt them too bad, did you? Your mama said they all walked out of there. I pulled my punches. Grandma, could have been much worse." Rose chuckled. "That's my girl. Strong enough to fight. Wise enough to show mercy. You remember that balance? You hear me?" "Yes, ma'am." The conversation with her grandmother lifted a weight Amara hadn't realized she'd been carrying. The guilt over breaking her promise had been eating at her, even though she knew she'd had no choice. Now, with her grandmother's blessing, she felt truly free for the first time since moving to Connecticut. Spring arrived with unexpected opportunities. A video of Amara teaching self-defense to younger students went viral in positive ways, catching the attention of USA Boxing. They invited her to try out for their youth development program, a fast track to potential Olympic training. College scouts who had previously overlooked her because of her small stature and quiet demeanor suddenly recognized the fighter they'd missed. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came in April. Just 2 weeks before the end of the school year, Amara was eating lunch in the cafeteria, no longer alone but surrounded by a diverse group of friends she'd made through the anti-bullying committee and her self-defense classes, when a freshman girl approached hesitantly. "Excuse me," the girl said quietly. "Are you Amara Johnson?" "That's me," Amara replied, recognizing the look in the girl's eyes, the same hunted expression she'd worn for months. "I'm being bullied," the girl whispered, glancing around nervously. "These older girls, they wait for me after school. They take my money, pull my hijab, call me names. I'm scared all the time." Amara felt the familiar anger rising, but this time it was protective rather than personal. "What's your name?" "Fatima." "Okay, Fatima. Here's what we're going to do. First, you're going to report this to Miss Chen. I'll go with you. Then, you're going to join our self-defense class. Not to fight them, but to walk with confidence. And if they approach you again, you won't be alone. We've got your back." True to her word, Amara accompanied Fatima to report the bullying. The new administration took it seriously. Investigating immediately, the girls harassing Fatima were identified and disciplined. More importantly, Fatima found a support system she hadn't known existed. Other students who'd been targeted, who understood what she was going through. Watching Fatima transform over the following weeks, from a terrified victim to a confident young woman who walked with her head high, reminded Amara why her fight had mattered. It wasn't just about her own dignity, it was about changing a culture that allowed bullies to thrive while their victims suffered in silence. On the last day of school, Principal Hayes, the new principal brought in to reform, Lincoln High called a special assembly. Amara tried to skip it, uncomfortable with public recognition. But Miss Chen insisted she attend. "This has been a year of change for Lincoln High." Principal Hayes began, addressing the packed auditorium. "Difficult change, necessary change. We've had to confront ugly truths about our culture and our failures. But from that darkness has come light, largely thanks to students who had the courage to speak up and stand up." She called several students to the stage, including members of the anti-bullying committee. Amara tried to blend into the group, but Principal Hayes singled her out. "Amara Johnson," she said, "your courage in the face of sustained harassment and your strength in defending yourself sparked a movement that has transformed our school. More than that, your work with other students, teaching them to find their own strength, has created lasting change. On behalf of Lincoln High, I apologize for what you endured, and I thank you for helping us become better." The auditorium erupted in applause. Amara stood there, uncomfortable with the attention, but recognizing its importance. This wasn't just about Harriet, it was about every student who'd been bullied, everyone who'd been told to just ignore it, everyone who'd suffered while their tormentors faced no consequences. As she looked out at the crowd, she spotted several faces. She recognized kids from her self-defense classes, members of the committee, students who'd found their voices because she'd found hers. In the back, she saw a group of freshman boys quickly separate after whispering something to a smaller kid. The kid stood straighter, met their eyes, and they walked away. The culture really was changing. After the assembly, as students streamed out for summer vacation, Amara found herself standing in the hallway where it had all happened. The locker that had been damaged in her escape had been replaced, shiny and new among its older neighbors. She ran her hand over the smooth metal, remembering the darkness, the suffocating fear. The moment she'd decided enough was enough. "No regrets?" Miss Chen asked, appearing beside her. "No regrets?" Amara confirmed. "I wish it hadn't been necessary. But I don't regret defending myself." "Good." That's the message we want students to understand. Stand up for yourself. Defend yourself when necessary, but also work to create a world where it's not necessary. As Amara walked out of Lincoln High for the summer, she felt a sense of completion. She'd started the year trying to be invisible, to disappear into the background and just survive. She was ending it as someone who'd changed an entire school's culture, who'd inspired others to find their strength, who'd proven that bullies only have power when we give it to them. Her phone buzzed with a text from her trainer at the boxing gym. "Olympic development camp in 2 weeks. You ready to show them what you got?" Amara smiled, thinking of everything she'd learned this year. She'd discovered that real strength wasn't just about throwing punches, it was about knowing when to fight and when to show mercy, when to stand up and when to lift others. She'd learned that promises, even sacred ones made to grandmothers, sometimes had to be broken when survival was at stake. Most importantly, she'd learned that one person standing up to injustice could inspire dozens of others to do the same. "Ready?" she texted back, and meant it in every possible way. As she walked toward her mother's car, Amara passed a group of incoming freshmen touring the school with their parents. One of them, a small black girl with glasses remarkably similar to what Amara used to wear, was walking with her head down, already trying to disappear. Amara stopped, walked over, and smiled at the girl. "Hey, future freshman?" The girl nodded shyly. "Some advice? Walk tall. You belong here just as much as anyone else. And if anyone tries to tell you different, remember, you're stronger than you think." The girl's mother gave Amara a grateful smile as her daughter straightened slightly, lifting her chin. It was a small gesture, but Amara knew how much those small gestures could matter. Walking away, Amara thought about the butterfly effect though. One moment of standing up for yourself could ripple outward, creating waves of change. She'd never wanted to be a hero or a symbol. She'd just wanted to be left alone. But sometimes, life doesn't give you what you want, it gives you what the world needs. And maybe, just maybe, the world had needed Amara Johnson to show that even the smallest, quietest person could open a can of whoop-ass when pushed too far. That knowledge, spreading through hallways and classrooms, through whispered stories and viral videos, might prevent other kids from ever being pushed to that breaking point. That was a legacy worth fighting for.